do some more analysis.
Make sure everybody gets introduced.
Sure.
Sorry.
Sir. And so we have spent the last 4 weeks, four and a half weeks or so, working towards this, and we gave you a preliminary report on Friday. I think a copy has been laid out in front of you too, if you didn't bring it. And we put a little bit more meat on the bone, and drawn a few conclusions that we've added to your report there. Before we get started, I will reintroduce Mike Thiessen to you. Mike is with the Madison group that did the original facility assessment report, and so he's available if you have any questions about the economics of the deal that we know at this point. And I'll give him some time in a moment to talk about Winter Park and its place for minor league baseball and kind of where we are from that standpoint, and based on what we've been telling him. He's been talking with various parties also, so we're going to be using him. If we continue this process, we'll be using him to help us with the negotiations and to get the final deal terms put into place. And Mike, I believe you know the commissioners that are here. So, well, with that, I want to talk a little bit about where we've been over the last couple of months working towards this. So we've may not seem like it, but we have made a lot of progress. We had meetings with 3 of our advisory boards. We met with the Parks and Rec Advisory Board, the Economic Development Advisory Board, and the Community Redevelopment Agency Advisory Board, and had some good conversations with those citizen groups. They all were in favor of continuing the process, exploring it. Like you, they didn't have enough information to actually say this is where we think it should go. I do think the CRA Advisory Board was leaning toward the site at this point, but again, they're waiting for more information also. But I think they like the Martin Luther King site the best. But, we've had conversations with the team owners, conversations with various developers on the different sites that we talked about. We've had conversations with Rollins College and with Orange County staff. We've had a conversation with Orange County school board staff about the Protect property, and so we've made a lot of progress. And as I said in the report, the more we look at the tree farm, the former tree farm site, we've kind of removed that from top consideration at this point, primarily because of visibility and access, as well as being completely surrounded by residential neighbors. So that one's kind of put on the back burner, though it may come into play if we continue to pursue the Martin Luther King site, because that would be the location we replace those fields if we go that route. And as I said in the report, we brought the Harper Shepherd Field site back into play. We kind of thought it was coming out of play there towards the end of last year. But in conversations with Rollins, they're willing to keep that site in play, and if it is the most viable option, they're willing to work with us on that site. One major thing that we've concluded through this process is that the team had a desire to be in Winter Park by spring of 2015. And as time has continued to go by without all these deal terms put into place, it was obvious that we're not going to meet that. And we met with the team last week and talked about that it's going to be 2016, it'll be spring of 2016 before we will be able to get anything done. And there's a timetable that I put in your package. It shows that even at 2016, this is a tight schedule. Because, securing the revenue sources and all that's going to take up some time, and then you got to design it and start construction. So, at that point, we're looking at spring of 2016. In that conversation, the team was disappointed, but we believe they're still in the game. So they want to be in Winter Park. So we're moving forward with that with the 2016 start date.
Randy, does that can we just?
Sure.
Yeah, I think it would be better if we really let him make his presentation, and then I think it might be better instead of
Yeah, I just want to know.
Then we'll go around the room and ask her questions. So
Okay.
the yellow paper in front of us is a good thing to write questions instead of word.
And I got a couple more comments, and then if we want to go site-specific, Mr. Mayor, we can go through all the sites, or we can do some of the preliminary questions up front.
Well, to me, the money is a whole lot more important than the site right now, so.
Right. And, you know, in each of these sites, there's a shortfall. And so the challenge over the next few months, and that you saw in my recommendations, I'm asking for the commission to let us run through August to try to see if we can get the gap, 11 million to 35 million, depending on the site. And even the 11 million, that's our Pacheco Field site, 5 of that is CRA funds from extending the CRA, which the county hasn't approved yet. So that's really not a done deal either. Don't be an ask, we have to go to the county and get permission to, in consideration of doing that. So really from 16 to 30 some odd $1 million short, and it will be staff's goal to bridge that gap, you know, primarily with other people's money. They're looking for other sources, whether it be state revenues, tourist development tax, new markets tax credit, more money from the team, more money from Rollins, more money from other private parties, whether it be foundations or sponsors or that type of thing. So that's what we would really be hitting the ground hard over the next 5 months to try to accomplish. With that, I want to give Mike just a moment to talk about the Winter Park market and where we are. And Commissioner, I think you remember Mike Nason from.
That's okay.
You did this, that's what.
I did, yes, ma'am. Thanks for having me. Much warmer than you want, I think, so. That alone is. Yeah. I guess just a couple things, from a global perspective, as we've been having some early conversations with the team. It's probably safe to say this is at least the 3rd time that Winter Park's been approached about this project, whether it's Winter Park, whether it was Rollins, whether it was this general area. So I think you need to take that number one as a positive, because it shows you that there's a feeling that this is a good place for a team to be located from the private sector. And I think it also shows that there's probably a little bit of deal left to be cut in terms of if you come around to the Winter Park Central Florida location more than once, you think that obviously there's going to be an economic benefit for you to locate your team here. I guess the second thing is remember that these are based on territories. So once you have or you secure a team, it's going to be very hard for them to leave. And every team is matched up with one Major League Baseball team, which is really beneficial. So you're not dealing with independent teams. There's always going to be a player. They're always matched up with a big league affiliate. And obviously this market knows what Spring Trend can do from an economic development perspective. We're not talking about that from this area, but you see what happens when big league players and minor league baseball players do together and come to an area. Then I guess the third thing is I would probably say is you've got a very unique opportunity where I think the elements of a deal are here. They need to be worked through. That doesn't mean that there is a deal. It just means that the bigger bones of the deal are here. And obviously, as in any business deal, the devil's in the details. So I don't think that we've identified all the funding sources. I don't think we've pushed all the parties to the edge yet. I have one particular client, and mine also, you'll see a little bit of a redneck come up, but he said, when everybody at the end of the deal is sick, everybody's puking, it's a good deal. Everybody's happy, but they're unhappy at the same time. And we're not at that point on this particular deal. We haven't pushed all the parties. We haven't gotten everybody tied down. We haven't seen how far they are willing to go. So I would say if you know, to Randy's point, you won't know that until August. You may know before August that the deal is not viable, but you won't know that you have the opportunity to do a deal probably until August. I mean, if you're going to take yourself out of the ballgame today, that's okay. I would probably tell you, having done 12 or 15 of these around the country, we might be a little premature if you have any desire to try to move forward, to just see what's left on the table, what's left to happen, where it can go, where the impact is, all those kind of things. So globally, there's, like I said, 3 things. This team has come back a couple of different times. You're in a unique position to get a team that's got a major league affiliate, which is good. And you just don't know quite whether this is a good deal or a bad deal. You just don't have all your information. We need more research. We need more time.
Okay, direct your attention to page 5, which is the timeline. Just real quick, it's basically, we're looking at having the next 5 months to work on the deal components.
Make sure we're all talking to the mics, just make sure everybody can hear us.
All right, thank you. Am I not close enough to it?
You might be referring to me.
Yeah, to everybody, as we talk, have a request from the audience that we all make sure we speak into the mic, so.
And can you specify what deal components are? Not all of them, just 3 or 4 of them.
Sure.
Now, we were talking about the timeline first. Let's go to his presentation, then we'll take the
Well,
questions.
he just said,
Yeah, over this 5 months,
Right.
it would be the deal components, not only of where the funding would come from to build and construct the stadium, but what are the shared revenues going forward, what are the shared expenses going forward, who's responsible for what, and who's going to get the share of what revenues would be part of the deal components that would be negotiated
okay,
over that time. There's all types of revenue sources related to it, owning a team as well as owning a stadium, and whether that be ticket revenues, concessions, advertising, naming rights, all those types of things. So part of what has to be completely negotiated is how all those revenues are shared, and does any portion of that go into a depreciation fund, all those types of things that have to be worked out. And then in August, we hope to be back to you with some recommendations on site, deal terms, whether or not we should proceed, obviously, is the first one. And then, and at that point, if the commission says, yes, this looks like something we want to do, then we have to go through the regular planning process in the city. We go through the 30-day, or the citywide notice. They'd have to go to P&Z. It'd likely be a conditional use. It may require rezoning depending on the site location. And then it go through P&Z and the city commission process, and then bidding it out and constructing and all of that. It takes you through the rest of the time. Any questions on that timeline? And there are, and let me just say generally.
So why don't you finish your presentation, then we'll take questions. Is that okay? So if there's anything else you want to add, then if people have specific questions, by the time we can ask them.
This timeline could be altered, obviously, depending on which site we head towards. For example, if the VOTEC site happens to be the site that makes the most sense, there's a school there. That school would have to be replaced somewhere, so that that could throw timing issues in there that's not factored into this particular timeline. All right, so now I have the analysis of the 4 different sites. So Greg, let me go ahead and go through that first, and then
I don't know, will the commission, you want to ask questions about what we've heard so far before we ask about the particular sites?
If we do, if we just keep them to what we've heard so far, let's not.
Yeah,
change anything.
right. So questions of what Randy has presented up to this point that you want to clarification?
In regards to the timeline, because each one of these sites represents a different negotiation, and you're right, some of them may take longer than 2016 to accomplish, especially if you're looking at something like a VOTEC study. So I just wondered how tied into that 2016. Obviously, that's one of the variables on the table. Okay.
Carolyn?
My question is actually RJ, and I'm not sure. Sorry, I was, can you hear me now? Can't tell a difference.
can you hear me now?
Okay, good. My questions are very general in nature, actually. And one of them is to Mike, and that is, what is the likelihood, have you in the past closed an $11 to $30 million gap without having to have the municipality or the taxpayers pick up the difference?
Well, closing the gap at this point, yes, you have. But I think it depends on how many parties are involved in this particular case. So if we've got a developer, let's say Rollins comes back to the table, we've got a baseball team, we've got Winter Park, and say we have the county. So we've now got 5 people involved, all of them have different economic structures to participate in the deal. 30 is a lot of money, 11 to me is probably doable. But again, I wouldn't say at this point, take yourself out of the game if they don't.
Okay, and my next question is general in nature. Are there any options that we can eliminate now as a group or do we have to, I hate to see you
That's
go.
a site question.
Yeah, I'd like
Why
to
don't we
stay
hold
on
that
that.
till we get to
Uh,
site?
A schedule question would be, if you look at the schedule that we have now, it goes clearly past one opportunity for a citizen vote. We have an election coming up in March. If we are going to push the timetable out to further into 2015, we have another opportunity. I personally am excited about the prospect of a baseball team, but I also know it's not a moneymaker for the city. The $60 million that we're looking at is over Orange County and Seminole County, not just Winter Park. And so for me, I would feel much better if I knew my neighbors were equally as excited about moving forward. And it seems like we have two opportunities to ask them. The first one being March, and the next one being next March, when we would have then the details of the analysis. So that's just one idea I wanted to put out on the table. Just let the voters tell us they're excited about this.
So Randy, tell us under what circumstances we've had the vote of referendum, any kind of vote of referendum, and for what would those be for?
Right, well, obviously, you can't have it on this March ballot because.
Right, well, I'm not talking about timing, I'm talking about what goes on a ballot for our voters.
I'm just addressing her
You're right.
comment. It can't be this March because the ballots have already been sent to
Right,
people.
that's right, absolutely.
But under our charter, if you're using ad valorem taxes as a pledged revenue source, under both the state statute as well as our charter, that would require a vote of referendum.
So if we bond any of it, is that what that?
If you bonded and pledged
Ad valorem taxes,
Right.
property.
if you bonded.
Not CRA, not
The
CRA.
charter has an exception, or, that's right, CRA is a separate animal over CRA bonds. If it were, and your charter has an exception for parks facilities. So to acquire parks, for example, it does not require a voter referendum. That was voted in by the voters
All right, I have read
3 or
that.
4 years ago. I don't remember how long, but not that long ago.
And we're able to define something that's going to be used primarily by a college and by a money-making agency as a park. I have a hard time with that, so I would love to know legally if we can do that.
It's a valid question that we'd have to
We have
get
to
bond counsel to weigh in on.
There's precedent in other places, because if you look at it, let's say food has roughly 75 games, the college has 40, that's 110, that leaves an additional 255. Now, granted, some of those are going to be on holidays. And in many cases where you have a lot of youth sports, you can easily play 3 Little League games in one week, a 5:30 game, 7:15 game, and 8:45 game. Anybody that can play at a 90-foot pace to that. And if you incorporate the design to also include soccer, but the rectangular field versus a baseball diamond, you can open it up quite a bit.
So we would structure the lease so that there was dedicated time, regularly scheduled for the city so that we could use those.
Right.
Because I think that's the problem we ran into before, trying to share Harper, Shepherd with Rollins, is that when we needed it as a city, it wasn't available. So if the lease can be structured
Right.
to capture and guarantee that.
Lots of time within a lease, there's a section, it's called the community use agreement or community use document, and it usually takes form of a couple things. It's community uses, might even be central locations for the park, where there might be a concert, there's sometimes symphony orchestras that play, baseball things, it's really a nice thing to have underneath. The other thing is usually what's called the good neighbor agreement, which is when you could start a last standing, whether you can use fireworks and things like that. So it alleviates, if it's close to a residential neighborhood, that they're good neighbors to the neighbor, plus you've also got the park and the community uses will be defined within that lease as well.
My last concern, of course, is that we're not doing the traffic studies until pretty much after you have done all the negotiating with all the parties. And it just seems to me that by the time you have already negotiated with the developer and the team and the Rollins on operating costs, revenues, and responsibilities, and negotiating a proposed lease agreement, by then you've invested so much energy and passion into it that it would be very difficult for us to say we're not going to do that site because of traffic study. And we're so close as a community, we're only 8 square miles, 9 square miles. It would seem to me that we could eliminate some of the options right up front just because of the traffic impacts before we went through all of that. So for me, it was how the schedule was arranged, not the schedule.
And staff's okay doing the traffic study on all 4 sites. I personally think it's an expenditure of funds is not necessary for all 4 sites.
So they're pretty close to running out of.
They are, so the impact's not gonna be much different from one to the other,
That's
so,
what I'm thinking.
Where would we do traffic if, I mean, somebody might, Rollins could come to us and say, we want to redevelop Harper Shepherd. We wouldn't do traffic today, we would do that as part of the development process, the approval for the development process. I think that would be the timing you would do traffic.
well, it has to be turned in as part of the,
Yeah.
as part of the conditional use application, that's correct. But, you know, if you look at it holistically, we're talking about roughly 1,000 cars on a good day, maybe 1,200 cars on a game that's, you know, Saturdays and Sundays when you have a bigger attendance, which is off-peak travel time. And when you compare it to what could go with these locations, I mean, 1,000 cars, 70 nights a year is going to be less than what would likely go there if it's developed commercially. So it's not, I mean, I'm not downplaying the importance of the traffic study. I think it is important.
But I mean, we haven't asked Starbucks that went into the corner with a drive-through, how many cars are going to go through there? I don't know if there'll be 1,000 cars, 500, I don't know.
We asked them if it's a certain usage, that we do have a 1 mile traffic study is required for any major development.
So I'm not just that way.
So, you know, one thing.
I'm just trying to figure out.
No,
how it
that's-
makes
it's-
sense to
it's a
go
great
all
point.
the way through that process and then say we're gonna do a traffic study, because it's almost a joke.
Well, I want to, if you look at the timeline, we're doing the traffic study in the middle of the deal. We're not doing it at the end of the deal, we're doing it in the middle of the deal, or potential deal. And where we're getting to in August is staff coming back and saying, we've got a couple of sites that we think are going to work, and we got to start a whole process.
Well, I don't think we should get bogged down in this too. I agree, because I agree with you. Let's just, can we keep moving forward? 'Cause I think when it's there, I mean.
It strikes me as a logical time to do it. I
I think
mean,
it's fine.
unless we're just going to put up a big giant, nothing's going to be built in Winter Park from now on because there's too much traffic, you know, which could be said, I suppose.
I think the concern is valid. It's on the schedule to do, and I think you're hearing it.
As you move forward, remember that the ratio of fans to parking spaces is about 3.5 to 1. Because obviously, my 15-year-old daughter does not drive when we go to the baseball game separately. So you tend to go as a fan. So to Randy's point, you have a Friday night sellout at 3,600 fans, that's only 1,200 spaces. And you're going to have off-peak in the morning, off-peak in the evening. So if the game's at 7:30, most of your traffic is going to start at about 10 minutes to 7 roughly to get in. And when the game's over at about 10:15, that's when you have your big push, but then you're not really in any kind of a rush hour traffic at 9:45 to 10:15. So, you know, just take into account it's probably equivalent to a big movie theater letting out as they cycle through in terms of the cars and it'll dump out onto the street.
So other than the fact that if there's a way to eliminate any of these options up front, so that you're not spinning your wheels, if you know that any of the partners aren't willing to go to a location, or if we, you know, if we know those things, there's no sense in dragging them.
Sarah?
My question's about all the people at the table working on this. We got here because it started with the baseball team and Rollins and us a little bit, and now I see more people. Have you got experience that shows all these different entities able to work together and make something like this happen?
Yes.
Can you give me an example?
Well, I can give you several examples. What level of detail would you like an example?
Not
So-
a great deal, I just need to know
So-
that there's a.
so there-
If
there's
two
a-
people couldn't agree, why do you think five?
Well, number one, multiple people can agree if there's money involved, as you know. If there's a business deal to be made, then obviously the parties will all come to work together.
All right.
So most recently, there was a deal that we did with the community college and the baseball team. And the city did some infrastructure and some parking lot improvement. The college did some money and some bonding. They played their home games there, men's and women's baseball and softball, and then also men's and women's soccer, and then there's a minor league baseball team. So that was a 4-party deal.
And who was the lead on that?
At a certain point, the city was the lead because the city was the one that could understand kind of where the ebb and the flow needed to be. Everybody comes into a deal with their own self-interest. But once those are broken down and it comes to the point where the only way this is gonna work is if we all work together. There's always a little bit of screaming and yelling at every issue, but as long as somebody's willing to keep pushing it forward, everybody at some point will come to the table together.
So you can share the wealth and share the risk?
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. I don't think
So that
I don't
would
think
be
you
the
want to
point.
proceed any other way.
Okay.
I don't
That's-
think you want to proceed any other way. Because I haven't heard anybody say they want to spend $30 million to build a baseball stadium at this table.
No,
Okay.
no, you won't.
Okay. Establish those rules during those negotiations, then that's where the craft of the deal comes together.
Okay, I understand better. I'm just trying to get a picture of how this has happened in other places that's been successful before we go much further down that road.
Ideally, the best thing about having multiple parties, which makes deals harder, because obviously two people can't decide to go to Rush Street, it's impossible for it's, you might as well order in. But when you have multiple parties that work together, ideally you've got a little bit of each adds to a bigger aggregate than any of them would get if they work by themselves. So 2 and 2 ends up being 5, because everybody gets a little bit more if they would have had to work to do something like this by themselves.
Do you have an example where it was not a city that was the lead that worked?
Well, almost every case, a team will take the lead to get started because they've identified the market. It's called what's mining the market. They think that a market's got a good profile.
And that sort of happened here, right?
That sort of happened here a couple times, and I think that's a testament to what this market could mean for a baseball
Yeah.
team. Every deal's different. I mean, who's the lead publicly and who's the lead behind closed doors are separate things. Some of that's a function of how do you want it to play out from a winner park perspective. If you want to be the lead, you can be the lead. If you don't care, but you just want to get the deal done, those deals get done behind closed doors.
Okay. We just can't have closed doors here.
No, and understand,
Okay.
I know what you're saying, but when
Yeah. I understand,
when you're in a negotiation, there's a lot of things that are going back and forth.
And I would like the commission to understand the deal points. I mean, I wouldn't want that to all happen.
Right.
And then be brought to us.
Right. Well, you debrief on a pretty regular basis. You would have to. But deals like this tend to evolve. They start, there's a speed bump, and they pull back. Then they start, there's a speed bump, and they pull back. Then they get over one speed bump, and there's another one, and there's another one. They just kind of evolve until where everybody's at that point. Well, unless somebody says they're gonna write a $30 million check, yes, we need the time. And we obviously haven't heard it today, and we haven't heard it from the team when we were on the phone with them last week, so no, we need some time to have that involved.
Hey, Mike, can you explain to me, the 3 times you said this has been brought back, it's been the same team?
It's
Correct?
been, roughly the same ownership, Dr. Winters.
Can you explain to me category exclusivity and what that means?
Sure, baseball is very much like having a McDonald's franchise. So they're given a territory that they just have the market. So right now, I believe Dr. Winters has applied to minor league baseball, which is headquartered in St. Pete, and he's been granted the opportunity to explore this market in the, Orange County, Osceola County market for minor league baseball to see if he can make that happen. He still maintains his Brevard County territory, but if he could make this one happen, then he would be granted this market. And nobody then could take this market from him unless it was a higher classification. So in full disclosure, if Major League Baseball were trying to come in, go into Orange County or Florida in this area for regular, they could say, hey, you're out, we're in. That usually involves big checks being written, or they say, we're gonna waive, you can go ahead and keep minor league baseball here because we don't think it will affect what our attendance is.
So he's got exclusivity for all aspects of minor league, A, double A, triple?
He has for his Florida State League now, and then if a higher classification comes in, they can draft the territory, but that's when another business negotiation would take place between those two teams.
And how long does this exclusivity run?
As long as he's got a team here.
So if he's in Brevard County right now and he's still approaching it and he's still applied for this exclusivity, if we say, you know what, we're not ready to do this by 2016?
He typically, baseball works on their own set of laws, obviously, when they were granted many years ago. Typically, you get a period of time to try to show that you've made substantial progress with the deal. So he probably has to report back probably on a 6 or a 9 month basis back to minor league baseball saying, we're having a good conversation, things are progressing, I could use another 6 months extension, I could use another 6 months extension, which is to my point to why I brought it before. There's enough interest in this market from baseball and this particular team that they're going to continue to grant that if there's any chance that the deal will be done. So I don't think you should worry about that being taken out from underneath you if you're making progress.
No, I'm not worried about that at all. I'm worried about the tail wagging the dog. And I want want to make sure that we're doing what's right here in the city. If we want minor league baseball, and we think baseball is important for the citizens of Winter Park, I think in the region, I think we need to make sure it goes where we want it to go, on the time frame that we want it to go in. If that so works out between 2016 and today, fantastic. If it doesn't, I don't want an owner coming and saying, I'm going to lose exclusivity, and I've got a lease signed at my other place, and that to me is I want kind of almost a team neutral solution here. We have some fairly well-established things going on in this town, and I don't want to take some leaps for one specific team or one specific owner. I'd like to make sure that we do what's right. And if it happens to be them, I've got no problems with that team or that owner specifically. But I want to make sure that we do what's right for the area. And every time we hear, it's got to be done because they got 2015 started that season. Well, now it's 2016 season. And they keep coming back and they keep coming back. There's a great opportunity here if we decide to do something to do it for future generations as well as the current one. And I want to make sure we do the right thing in the right place.
Well, I think it's important that there was a conversation of a quick deal is not a good deal, and a good deal that's quick is not necessarily a good deal. So when the team was told that 15 was not really even physically practical from putting the deal together, lease, capital structure, and then doing the design, doing the building, going through all the permitting process, it wasn't physically possible. The laws of physics would not allow us to build the stadium that quickly. So that was an unrealistic deadline, and the city said, that's an unrealistic deadline for us. If you're willing to keep 16, might be a possibility, but there was no commitment that it would happen in 16. But the city already drew the line in the sand and says 15 was not a realistic deadline. So don't push 15 on us. If you can't live with no 15, then let us know now.
And their current deal with their landlord extends through.
I don't know that. I mean, I would be guessing. So I wouldn't want to tell you it's next year or 16 or 18.
Okay, thank you.
They might have a termination, like, I don't know what that's.
Mr. Mayor.
Randy, before you got something warmed up?
No, I was just going to go into the sites.
Yeah, before you go into the sites, and for me, you know, the sites are very interesting, and obviously they might impact certain things in different ways, but the funding of, I guess, the stadium is the most interesting thing, or the park acquisition and all of the above. You know, maybe Mike, you might want to weigh in, and you've studied this document that Randy's prepared, I'm assuming. Rules of thumb, I mean, I think you've already clearly heard, if not, I'll certainly echo the comments that, you know, we're not going to tax our citizens to do this. I wouldn't consider that in any way, shape, or form. Randy has a list of, I guess I would say, different types of funding sources. I don't know if you would weigh in on that, as well as the possibility of some of the revenues, because I've seen things, I guess I would say, all over the board as I've studied this, in terms of what might be available for naming of a stadium, what might be available for additional funding. So there's what page is that on? Page 2, thank you. That was the only page, isn't it? So I don't know if you would look at those things, and maybe between you and Randy, you might want to comment on some of those just in general.
Yeah, let me take the first shot. A couple things there. Every deal is completely different and unique, and a lot of it is dependent on what's available in terms of funding opportunities. So in some cases, you may not have the opportunity to have a tourism development tax the way you had in Florida. In some cases, you may have CRA funding, or you don't have CRA funding. In some cases, there may be a private developer or not be a private developer. So there's not a cookie cutter approach to any deal. They're all very unique. I guess the second thing is, one of the things that has proved out over time in terms of the last few deals is typically the team side, if you look at the last, not the last deal, but the last aggregate of deals, the team's usually in between about 30 to 35% of what the capital costs are. And what form that takes is obviously something to be negotiated. Bigger markets, they may be more than that. Lesser markets, they may be less than that. That's, again, part of the deal. If you go and you say, take the last 20 minor league stadium deals that were done, the team's going to be in for between 30 and 35% of what the capital costs are. The current situation is not at that number, and that's to my point about that's still a little bit left of that deal up for you guys. you know, I think any of these things need to be explored. I mean, obviously, some of them don't come into play if we're not adjacent to where the CRD funding is even an opportunity. If we go to a private opportunity to where we're dealing with a private developer, they may see a bigger value in versus if we do that Parker Shepherd or we do that Martin Luther King. Any of these sites have different tools that the other ones don't have.
Mike, can I ask you a quick question
Sure.
on that? Are any of these dependent upon publicly owned land supporting the funding sources?
It's understanding the tourist development tax can't be spent on privately owned land. So that one, if at the Harper Shepherd Field site is my understanding that's not an option for funding source for that site.
So that's a funding source you would have because you were the city that was applying.
Right.
And you wouldn't have it if you were the private provider
Right,
applying.
so, and so
Okay.
when you start looking then at VOTEC or Rabotage, then it matters who ultimately owns the land
Yeah.
Thank
on
you.
those.
That's what I understood, I just want to clarify.
But if we were to purchase Harper Shepherd, then that would bring it back into play for that kind of funding.
That's correct.
I mean, that's still something that is a card. Okay.
And to your point, Steve, you know, as I've studied this, there are things I want you to finish, Mike, but to your point, you know, if we were to do this, I think there are certain things that we need to make sure we clearly get out of it. And one of those is 6 to 8 acres of space that we don't own today, or that we put into place 6 to 8 acres that we don't have in play today. And I mean, I think that would be a real critical thing as a city. I mean, I think that in and of itself is a generational opportunity. I don't know where we could even acquire that kind of space today. And what that might allow us to do in the future is really important. Finish what you were going to say, and then I wanted to ask you about your economic impacts.
Sure. So while some of these apply to some of the sites, some of them clearly don't apply to some of the sites. So we've got a smattering of, 14 opportunities here. As you start taking sites out, you also start taking funding mechanisms out. And I would say where you are, I seem to feel that there's a desire to maybe pull a couple sites off the table, which is fine. As the electeds, you have the ability to do that. But to keep it a little bit fluid, at least for a little while longer, is going to give you your most leverage to try to negotiate the best deal, because you really then don't know where it's going. So you can say, I get a little bit more here, I won't get as much here, I can have someone give me more here, not give someone more here. So if you're strong enough to pull sites off, that's fine. Understanding you might be pulling some financing opportunities off as well.
And just real quickly on the new markets tax credit, since that's one you'll probably, at least in my tenure here, we've not talked about at the commission level. Dory and I have spent about 3 hours with very smart people explaining these tax credits to us, and I couldn't explain it to you, but.
And they broke her ankle.
That was the price of doing business, to listen to them for 3 hours.
But we have some very smart people in this community that do understand these things, and it's a multifaceted opportunity. There's ways that we can get those from a bank, there's ways we can get those straight to the federal government, there's ways we can get those from the state government, there's ways we can get those from other entities who have applied for those tax credits. So we have some people that are working with us to see if that's a viable option. But in a nutshell, what it is a very low interest rate loan that at the end of a 7-year period, you don't have to pay back the principal. The tax credit, the income tax credit provided by the federal and state government pays off ultimately, not directly, but ultimately that's how they get their money. And so
And do any of the sites limit the use of that? Is that site dependent at all?
it's not site
Ownership.
well, it is ownership
So it is
dependent.
No, I don't know. I don't, my question is ownership.
Well, there are some ways that the borrower cannot be the government. So the city could not be the borrower. So there's some nuances like that have to be worked out. Whether a nonprofit group that all the parties are part of, or, so that's some of the details that have to be worked out if that's a revenue source is viable.
How much money would something like that, how much is a revenue source like that available? Are you talking about $5 million, $10 million, what are you talking about?
Well, You're talking about up to 30% of the project cost.
So you have 30% there and 30% on the team, you got 30%, 40, you know.
That's a
let
question I
go.
don't have answered yet, whether,
Okay.
whether multiple parties could borrow it
All right.
and put it towards the same project. I don't know the answer to that. But this option has some great opportunities for other stuff in the city in the future. That just the fact that we've now learned about this, I think there's some great opportunities for us unrelated to baseball going forward in the future. So that's one of the side benefits that's come from this study already. You know, that's the money that went to build a good portion of the Orlando arenas. We built the soccer stadium so that there's a tourist development advisory board. It's in Orange County, I'm sorry, Orange County. And all the revenues are collected from hotel taxes, bed taxes in Orange County. And so that money goes into a big pot, and the advisory board advises the Orange County Commission how to spend that money, and the Orange County Commission, Board of County Commissioners has the ultimate say in where that money goes. This would be an ask on our part. We'd have to go through the process of applying for it and go through all that. So that's, that's a good 3 to 5 month process and to.
That's not limited by the location.
No, it's not limited to us, but.
The CRA was obvious, but when I got beyond that, I wasn't sure
Well,
what limitation.
the limitation on that would, they said it couldn't go in the Harbor Shepherd Field side.
Its ownership is back to
Yeah.
Steve's.
If Rollins owns the property, it wouldn't be available for that, as our understanding. And, it goes down to, like all those projects, it's got to sound good, be good, and the county has been open to talking to us about working with them, but obviously staff can't commit to the Board of County Commissioners, so there's a process to actually apply for this funds.
Mike, would you discuss, I guess, the current economic study that you did, and then, I don't know if you've done anything, because that was done, I guess, maybe the fall or whatever, and.
Right. Well,
The economic impact.
Well, the study should show that a stadium like this, and at that particular point, we had put an emphasis on Harper Shepherd, because there was some thought that it would be the most expedient way to do it. There's already a baseball stadium there. There's a good working relationship with Rollins at any given point. So the number that you have in the first study was a little bit focused towards Harper Shepherd, but it's more of a generic number. Numbers can be tied down as we get more site-specific, because clearly where you've got a greater impact if the stadium is located near a retail or entertainment options, where there's going to be a greater overspill of dollars spent in that immediate area either before or after a game, versus if it's spent someplace where there's not access to retail or entertainment options. So if Botac or Ravanage or one of those places where it looks like there's going to be some push towards retail and entertainment direction, there's an opportunity there to probably have a greater economic impact. Now, having said that, Mayor, let's be honest, we're not talking about 6 million to 30 million, we're talking about 6 million to
Maybe
6.5
8
or 9 or some
Yeah,
things like
sure.
that. But all that depends on then what is also surrounding that stadium, the number of people that are going to that stadium, what they tend to spend, not only at the stadium, but in the immediate area as well.
And that 6 did or did not include the multiplier effect of building the building?
It did, that's the aggregate. Now, that's more of a quick, that's usually a
Right, you can
15
figure
or
that out
16
quickly.
18-month window.
Randy, did you want to discuss sites?
Pleasure of the commission, I'm certainly prepared to.
Sure, continue on.
So these are in order from south to north, I guess, not in any other type of order of preference, but we'll start with what's section A of the report, which is the Harper Shepherd Field, also known as Alpine Stadium. The existing Rollins Field sits on about 6.2 acres. And I have something that I've been corrected on since this came out. Under this option, Rollins would own both the land and the stadium as currently proposed. Team would be a tenant, but got an email from Jeffrey Eisenbach. Rollins would be the operator of the stadium if it's there. So I have that incorrect in the report. The advantage of this site is it's already zoned for baseball. It is baseball. The neighbors are used to baseball being there, though not those extra 70 nights a year that this would bring, and at a higher intensity, but they are used to having the stadium there. This is probably the least complicated of all the sites, just so there's less parties involved and less moving parts, I guess you would say. That site is within the CRA, and in preliminary discussions with the Orange County staff, they felt that it would be possible to get approval for a 5-year extension of the CRA. So our CRA is currently set to expire in 2027. And what they discussed with us was the possibility of extending that CRA to 2032, which would allow you to generate about $5 million towards building the stadium with those additional TIF and tax increment financing revenues.
Is that ours and their portion?
It would be ours and their portion, and but it's also assuming no growth between now and 2027. That's if everything stayed exactly like it is today, those are the revenues that it could support. Right.
Randy, how big a chunk of the CRA money is that? Would that be?
What it does is all the other bonds are paid off in 2027. So the debt service you were paying each year towards those bonds
Would now go to these bonds, so in effect would be,
the same percentage we're paying in debt
but
service.
it would be the CRA budget for this quarter.
Less than half the money.
It's about half.
But the CRA closes in 2027
No, but I'm saying
anyway,
right,
so
yeah.
that's.
Still,
You would still have residual revenue to the tune of 50 or so, about $1 million, to be able to spend during that 5-year time frame.
And that's assuming no growth. I mean,
Right,
that's-
but still, it's a-
Just to,
Clarify that, I think that's an important point
Yeah.
to know about CRA revenue.
Yeah.
First of all, let's be clear, the CRA, unless it's extended, is over in 2027.
right, so in 2027, the county would start getting all their tax revenue back, and if none of it would come to the city any longer. Under this proposal, extending it 5 years, we would get that county revenue for an additional 5 years. But at the same time, the city would be committing its revenue that currently goes into the CRA for another 5 years, which would be going back to the general fund at that point.
But if things are the way they are today, there'd be an additional, in addition to the debt service, there'd be an additional potential $1 million,
That's right. So
which is $5 million.
So right now, if you look at our CRA money, we got this base amount of money that we spend on operating programs, salaries, the different programs we do within the CRA, and then we have this chunk on top of the debt service. And all that money's coming from the tax increment of how much the CRA property values have grown since we started this back in 96 or whenever the CRA started, 94.
And would the county extend it for,
If they-
would they extend it if we wanted to build a library or
No.
a fire station or anything like that?
No. In fact, they're not extending anybody's CRAs anywhere.
But they might for this
They
specific.
said they might for this.
Project.
So even if there's no growth between now and 2027, we have both of these chunks of monies that would then continue starting in 2028. So we have all this operating money, all this program money we still get, as well as the money to pay the $5 million back on the stadium.
That's if it's extended.
That's correct.
If it's not extended,
Then it all goes away in compromise.
Right. All right, so one advantage of this site is it's in the CRA, as is the Hertfordshire, as is the Martin Luther King site, we'll talk about that in a moment. The obvious disadvantage of this site is parking. If you've been to a game there, they don't have many parking spaces, and there's not vacant space right next door that you can put a parking garage on at this time. It's certainly not to be controlled. So
A very nice property there, if you could work something out with those property owners. That would be a great place for the developers to be involved with.
And we've had conversations with the developer or the owner of the property next door, and we will continue to have this conversation.
But when you say that, Randy, explain how far a distance are we talking for a walk? I mean, we have Progress Point, which is not far at all.
Right.
That we own.
That we own, and it certainly could be a temporary site for parking until ultimately there is a parking garage, or, not sell that property or not develop that property.
Or make it part of whatever we do there.
Right.
Then you have to go pedestrian bridge.
No, you just have to have an off-duty officer crossing people before and after games, which, a lot of stadiums do.
Randy, why, we in here we mentioned again that until a site for a parking garage can be obtained, or until a park can be obtained, why aren't we carrying, I mean, there's an expense in a parking garage. Why are we not carrying that?
Right.
I mean, to me, it's like, there's 10 million, if we're saying it's a $10 million thing, I think that has to be,
And I have no problem with that.
at least a portion of that has to be carried in this discussion to be realistic.
It just had, in this case, it just didn't seem to be a simple, here's where we can put it type of place, and that's the only reason I didn't include it. But you're absolutely right. That's
Somewhere.
another, it's a $10 million number at that site as well. And then that makes your $11 million short, $21 million short.
I think that's for honest.
Well, but I think it's dependent upon,
Sure.
if we build the whole thing ourselves, and if we place it there and it's not part of something else.
Right.
So there's we're
There's
making.
some cost somewhere involved with the parking garage.
When we were-
We could carry half of that or something, but we want to carry something just to be apples to apples as we go down,
That's
as
a
we
really
go down
good
the
point.
list.
Well, because it's also, it would be used off hours, the majority of the time, we're talking 70 games, we're talking night games, off hour parking too. So it could be used by, if there's another development during the day.
There are advantages to all these sites where we talk about parking garages to the surrounding properties that have that garage. So it would be a community asset or a developer's asset, you know, how you look at it. But it would be a benefit to the commercial properties in each of those corridors if there were a garage. Because they all suffer from a lack of surface parking today. You think I'd be done with that?
No, I think we did.
Everything has its opportunities and advantages and disadvantages. I think personally, for me, if this is a preferred site, this is one where probably, since it's Rollins land, unless we acquire that land, et cetera, which there's probably numerous opportunities to consider that in exchange for Progress Point or whatever. I mean, that might be something we want to consider. I'd be hard pressed putting much money into that site if we don't own the land personally.
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah.
we got 3. All right, I'm happy to extend, I just want to.
Yeah.
No. Andy?
All right, so.
I got 6 minutes.
Second one on the list is Martin Luther King. We've talked about this before. Also, under this scenario, we already own the land. I think the most logical approach or to solve both the parking problem and the use of the youth fields that are there today would be to replace those fields at the former Tree Farm site, which is on our capital plan to do at the end of 5 years now, but it would, I believe, accelerating that plan would help make this site work, if that's the solution. And then you would use those fields on game day, on those 70 game days for surface parking. They could still be fields on non-game days for practice and that type of thing, so that's an option for that. The disadvantage, it doesn't have quite as good of access as some of the other sites. You know, you gotta get, there's no, Harper, it runs off of Fairbanks and off of Morse, and we would probably have to punch a road through from Denning into the site to get to parking, but it's big enough, but it takes away one of the multi-purpose fields, and again, you'd have to use those other multi-purpose fields to park on during non-game times, which we do and we do that now for Showalter for high school football games. We have people park on those fields that are game fields other days, so.
Are outfield used in parks like an off-season? I don't know my timing's well enough.
The team would probably not want you to park in actual.
No, I don't mean parking. I mean, did you have youth soccer in the
Oh,
outfield?
absolutely, yeah. I mean, if you're talking youth soccer where the kid's 70 pounds, he's not gonna be working
Yeah.
up the field that much.
Now, I mentioned in here the bowling alley site, and that is currently under contract. Hollis has it under contract with the developer. But if that deal falls through, I think the city commission should consider acquiring that. One, it opens up that vista view of the park from Fairbanks, but it also moves us towards our goal someday of being able to put a dedicated turn lane on Fairbanks,
Which is Fairbanks.
because that entire block is one of the bottlenecks of trying to get down Fairbanks. And if we could get a
middle lane, you shift those lanes to the north there. Yeah, from Denning all the way to Harper. We already have enough space in front of the Walgreens and we negotiated back when that was developed. So we'd actually be able to get that middle lane all the way for that entire block.
It's like Friends Gallery.
How many acres is that right now?
To the
Oh,
Merce
well.
Center.
I think like
One and a half, okay.
It's the back of the Burger King.
Yeah.
There's three different names.
Any questions on, okay, before we,
Randy, you listed in here land cost of the bowling alley. Does the project potentially work without the bowling alley?
it does, I think it's,
So that is a flexible
It
number
is.
that
it is a flexible number. If that 3 million comes out, then, you know, and we don't acquire the bowling alley, I think you'd still be able to handle it within the other. I think you'd have better access if you had that bowling alley site, because you can make.
no, there's other advantages to
Right.
that site.
And Randy-
above and beyond ball fields.
Yeah, the site, we at some point, because I mean, I've heard for 5 years, we need more fields
Right.
in Winter Park. So that's something that I think we need to look at, whether we explore minor league baseball or not. We need to see if the tree farm, which is a misnomer, if that nice wooded area,
The Northwest Sports
the
Complex.
Northwest Sports Complex is the right use of it or not, so.
Well, that was a question I had here, because you have 3 million in for the build out of that, Randy. But we still, that does not include the issues that we currently have, which are access, visibility.
We have, you know, we've negotiated with the Housing Authority for access from Monroe on the north side. Still got to build the road.
And we still have neighbors
Right.
who may not want a sports facility.
Right.
Sure, we have one of the most world-class sports facilities in Showalter Field that coexists in a neighborhood today too, so I mean, that's not something we haven't done.
And they often do.
I think that $3 million number to build out doesn't include some of the
Gonna
other
be a lot more than
things.
that.
The emotional energy, the emotional cost of that.
Well, it turned out the emotional cost, but I think it does factor in I think it factors in the cost of putting in the access road. It depends on whether we artificial turf those fields or
By
not.
the way, one thing, Randy, at least that I'm starting to see in parking lots, I know the hospital did one of these and all, the lights of 10 years ago are not the lights of today, right? I mean, they're very focused.
Sure, if you look at our new
I mean,
building,
you can do things that can certainly, and no matter what happens on that 14 acres, whether we dig up the trees and replant them or whatever, that you could have a tremendous minimization of what goes on in
you
the
look at our new field out at Katy Way, and how those lights work, and you drive by there at night, it's amazing how little, you don't have the light creepage.
There's no spillover.
But I sure do hear the loudspeaker.
Well, they got plans for that too, but I don't know
But I
if
like
they
it.
installed one at
The
Katy.
science of sound has changed a lot too when done
Good,
correctly.
yeah, okay. Good.
All right, and then the VOTEC, we spent a little bit of time talking about the northwest corner of Denning and Webster. That's where the VOTEC is today. I met with the Orange County staff members. They have been approached by numerous developers.
Orange County Public Schools,
They would have, yes.
you said Orange County.
Orange County Public Schools staff, right, sorry about that. They've been approached by a lot of developers interested in their property, and staff is going to make a recommendation at their next, I don't have a name for it, but,
Code.
a staff level board.
Oh, code, C-O-D-E.
Yeah, that's-
That's not it?
Uh,
That's who did it.
Whatever, they're gonna have a meeting.
Anyway, they're having a meeting whether or not they want to surplus that property soon, and so it may be in play.
Well, that could be in play with or without,
Right.
with or without this.
That's right, and if it is in play, that doesn't mean the city and its program here is going to be the winning bidder. And so, you know, if we bid $14 million, and they up to $16 million, the school's going to take the $16 million. So
Is it the entire site or just the back site? Where
it's the entire site.
The entire
Okay, so
site.
it's the entire site.
Right.
And that's our best estimate right now is the 6 million for carrying.
Well, the 14, yeah, they valued it at 14 million. Obviously, we're going to take, assume the highest bidder, but they valued it at 14 million. And so the 6 acres we need for baseball, I just factored that in at 6 million. Because 14 acres there with
It doesn't include building a new VOTEC center,
Well, it does not include it, except that that's.
what they will do with their money.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, so
Well, they
you're
have-
buying it, and they're, they would.
But they have schools that they may be able
If you
to.
saw,
That's-
or if you saw how the DMV went, you know, they had, the developer built them a new DMV site, and they got the property to do it.
So that's your best guess right now, given the deal terms that could happen with that.
$14 million for the whole site. And looking at what property's going around, that's right in the ballpark, and you know, it's a fair price.
And how many acres again?
There's roughly 13 to 14 acres
Okay.
there.
And that's particularly one of the ones I would be very interested in, the miles surrounding traffic assessment for all the Wabash, the Whole Foods, the new Kmart development, because all of that is going to come back into Salerno, Webster, and Palmer. And that's, so for me, that's a real hard one. I'd love to see it come off the table, but I appreciate the fact that we don't want to do that at this point. But
Well,
it's
something's
not-
gonna happen there, whether we talk about it or not. I mean, the school board could say, we're gonna build a new VOTEC center on that site and put 3,000 cars and we have to lump it. So, I mean, to me, the question is, do you wanna be in the driver's seat of saying what happens at the VOTEC site, or do you wanna accept it? Yeah. Commissioner
That's
Mackin?
what we drive into.
Just one quick one. Is 6 acres enough? And as we've talked about, we wanting to do the right thing for the city and wanting to do the right thing for going forward, we've always talked about 6 acres, and we kind of came up with that 6 acres when we were looking at the Rapidash site. Is that enough?
6
to
acres is
do
enough
a-
for the stadium.
To do,
The stadium itself.
Yeah, but not.
Not
yeah, I want to be clear, because it's,
Yeah. But if you're sharing parking, Commissioner, with other
well,
development,
I
private
just, but I
development.
just want to be clear that the 6 acres we're talking about gets the stadium in there. Any other activity beyond that is above and beyond
Right.
that, just in my own mind.
It's a fantastic point, because expandability, if you wanted to be AAA someday, or you wanted to be spring training, you know, you might get to a AAA size, you're probably not gonna get to a spring training site, because they need 40 acres, practice fields, all that kind of stuff. So we're not headed towards full-time spring training with this stadium.
No, but we're trying to potentially build a facility that people would want to come back to.
Right.
And if you can't get around it, if you can't park at it, if you can't do things, it's a one and done.
Right.
And so, if we're gonna do it, we're gonna talk about doing it, I wanna make sure that we are looking at sites and we're allocating funds at this level, at least on paper, and say, yes, it's gonna be 6 acres plus something to do it right.
Right. 6 acres is enough for the physical plant, it's not enough for the parking.
Okay.
What is enough for the park?
Well, that all depends on if you do structured parking,
What are you talking?
do you park
I
across the
assume-
street?
I assume that you do structural parking, and you're talking about 45, 60,000 seats? What are you talking
No, we're talking about,
3,500
yeah,
gallons.
3,000 to 3,500.
And how much parking is that?
Roughly 1,000 to 1,200
Spaces.
if you're
And how much acreage is that?
Well, it all depends on if you
How many
want
stories
to
you
be
do
across the street,
I
you want to
get it.
go,
I mean, you know, look at Yankee Stadium, Fenway Park, and Wrigley Field, and if they have 6 acres, they're lucky.
well, Wrigley Field doesn't have 6 acres of parking anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, no, I mean total,
Yeah.
sites.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, there's great advantages. We just quickly go over what you think's coming before us next week, and then we'll kind of conclude on that.
All right, so just real quick on VOTEC, finally, you know, we've been talking with Scott Fish, the developer of the Whole Foods, as a potential partner there. He's interested, again, devil's in the details, we're waiting for him to come back. And they showed us some concepts that they were working on, we don't have those yet, they showed them to us, but you know, it would interplay with the whole site. It would be kind of an exciting site from the energy it would generate around the ballpark and things that complement the ballpark. Rapidash was talking about way back. The only difference on that site at this point is the current site he's proposing is right up on 1792 instead of back further where it was before. Kind of closer to the old house. Again, beautiful interplay with what can be built around there. It's the most expensive at this time, but it also has opportunities that the others don't have, like the CDD structure. That could be a funding structure that might help out, and back to some of the shared revenues we talked about in the past. If the commission's willing to go down that route, it opens up some opportunities that the other sites don't have. Even though it's slightly more expensive, it could be a good kickstart to this development.
It's less disruptive to things.
There's fewer neighbors around it.
Got a nice open.
The access and visibility is fantastic. There's a lot of great positives about Providage. It's also a very complicated deal, and that's why you pay Dory the big bucks to handle these complications.
She's running out of ankles.
Randy, why don't you, because we've really gotten through item 1 through 5 on your preliminary conclusions, I think. Maybe it's 1 through 5B, because we talked about funding and then site. Do you want to talk about 6, 7, and 8? On your recommendations? I mean, I'm assuming this is what's coming to us
Right,
next
and
Monday night.
so on Monday, next Monday, I'm asking, does the commission want to proceed? Obviously, if there's not 3 commissioners that has any interest in this, then, we should tell the team owners so they're not wasting their time and energy and money, and we're not wasting our time and energy and money. But if we have 3 that are at least open to seeing where it takes us, then I'm asking for 5 months till August to try to put the real meat on the bones. I'd like to have Mike continue to work with us to help negotiate those deals, as well as update the assessment report, the site-specific, and continue with that process. And then, is the commission interested in continuing to pursue the bowling alley regardless of baseball? And that's not a commitment to buy it, it's just, can I tell Rollins that if their current deal doesn't close, if we're interested and would like to have an opportunity to negotiate for that property? Just a quick question on that.
Sure. Tom.
Randy, on number 6, it says staff to negotiate a proposed lease agreement if it is a site that the city would own. Are we going to apply that to all 4 sites?
Well, I mean, it depends on how the Harper Shepherd Field one works
Right,
out.
I mean, it's not, by making that statement here, that's not going to lock us out of
Right.
negotiating
Well, we wouldn't
for
be-
any.
We wouldn't be involved necessarily in the lease if Rollins owns the stadium and the field and the other team's leasing it from them. We're just, we might be involved in some type of tri-party or 4-party agreement that deals with revenues and expenses. and
I just, as we talked about whether who's going to own what,
The other side of that is, as Mike mentioned earlier, that community agreement would certainly be in play no matter what the lease arrangements were with Rollins if we stepped in and were a partner in that deal.
and when we come back on Monday, as you go through, would be the intent to be at August that we come back with, when we talk about ranking of sites, number 7 talks about studying 2 sites more specifically. Is the idea to narrow it down to either a deal or deal or something? I would hope by August that we wouldn't be still looking at all four, that somehow this process would bring forth either here's the deal above all deals, the ring to do all rings, or whatever it might be, but we'd get to a point where we will say, yes, we're going for something or not.
My expectation is a site or 2 will rise to the top as we try to narrow down these funding opportunities. If the door, if the school board, for example, decides they're not surplusing the OTEC property, that was gone.
Yeah.
And so that simplifies that,
Yeah, okay.
I expect some doors to open and some doors to close, maybe all doors closed, we don't know.
And maybe new doors would open.
Right.
We don't know.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
There'll be a natural attrition of the sites. They'll take themselves off the table.
Mr. Mayor, did I answer your question?
I think you did. I think that puts forth, so you're bringing this as a decision item at our next meeting, and it's basically item, I don't know what it'll look like. Do you have the sense that it'll be actually asking the commission to proceed or not to proceed with a 5-month period that may bring this to fruition or not, correct?
Yes.
And that would have both the stadium deal points along with potential lease deal points.
Can we get a clarification that we are not saying here tonight that we are going to build a stadium with city money? Because that's what's on the street, so we need to have a clarification exactly what we're doing tonight.
Absolutely,
Okay? And you said it already, I'd just like to have it said
Yeah,
again.
no, I mean, I'm happy to say that, but I think we all need to say that.
Right.
What is on the streets is often inaccurate, so, you know, we're not spending any money at this point.
Right.
Even on February 24th, if we decide, let's go study for this for 5 months, we're not, that doesn't mean we're spending any money. We may still come to the end of a 5-month or 1 month into it and go, this is done. I mean, and I certainly, as one vote, I can't speak for anybody else, but we're not gonna tax our citizens to do this.
I just wanted that clarified one more time, that we are not gonna tax our citizens to do this.
Yeah, I don't
But we
see
do
why
have
we
some-
would do that.
No, I don't
We
think.
have some
But if, you know, the
We
Sarah
have
Sprinkle
options.
Foundation wants to give $15 million for baseball in Winter Park, why would I say that's a bad idea?
Right.
I'm serious, I mean.
No, I understand, I'm out there right now, and I hear that, so I want everybody to hear what we just
also hear
did,
that
yeah.
we're building an arc and building all kind of other things as a city, so it's.
Thank you.
That's next year's project, that's in 2015, the arc is in.
I wrote for the artist, folks.
Thank you, that was well done.
Thanks, Randy.
Great, thanks for your
Mike,
time.
thank you.
Thank you, Mike.